Welcome to a main set episode of the MovieBuffs podcast. My name is Tyler, and I'm excited that we're doing something that I've talked about in other episodes, that is doing a special episode on Cassandro. The actor strike is over. I have one of my best friends, Ron, and co-host back to talk about a movie that he's in. I've said, and that's been no joke, Ronald was in this movie. I wasn't making it up. You can see him in it. I had it playing before to give me a refresher. So I am very excited. And before Ron starts to talk, I got to say that as Ron's one of my best friends, it's one of those things that I will admit it, that I, as a grown-ass man, that I was emotional during seeing it. Just the scenes that Ronald was in. And, you get very excited to see someone following their dream, following their passion. So Ronald, a big congrats for this opportunity. And, we were catching up before on things you're working on. And I know that everybody that knows you as a friend, family member, just hopes or wants the best and knows that you're going to continue to follow your dreams. So Ronald, let's get this good episode started.
Well, thank you, Tyler. You got me emotional just hearing that. No, but I appreciate the support, man. And, we both talked about this in private the whole time. It's been tough not being able to talk about it, not be able to do our episodes together. And, this was, before I get into anything about it, it legitimately was a dream come true,
Yeah.
I've got this role without an agent or a manager or anything. Literally, the guy who cast it, I forget his name, but he Academy Award nominee for the movie Roma is the casting director who cast me. So it was like really cool. I accepted the offer and then looked it up and I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't research too much. I would have been nervous. So it was a dream come true. I got to fly to Mexico. Mm-hmm. I got to go stay there for weeks on end. It was during the pandemic. So we had to test and retest. And but no, it was a dream come true. It was hard not to be able to do like a big premiere or do, talk about it. But I did get together with some family and friends and went to go see it in theaters. And earlier this year, we went to go see it world premiere at Sundance, which was an amazing experience. But yeah, all in all, it just was dream come true. And from consensus so far is that everybody loves it. And I think it's an amazing movie, but I might be a little biased.
Yeah, well, we will talk about that more in just a bit. I'm going to roll off some questions that I think it'd be fun for our listeners to hear about the background, your experience, more diving into your experiences, the people that you met. I mean, I believe you were filming in Mexico City, so we're going to get to that in just a bit. I do want to get a little background information for our listeners, but before we get there, as always, thank you for tuning in, listening. Ronald and I, starting the MovieBuffs podcast, of course we do for fun. And literally, it started off as hey, we should just podcast about movies. Ronald and I both do work in the fitness industry, and that is literally how it started. That we're just hanging out.
Instead of spending 3 hours doing our workouts and talking about movies, let's make them separate.
Exactly. So we appreciate you taking the time to listen, review it, share it. If you ever miss any of this episode, you could, of course, pick it up on YouTube. Make sure you smash that subscribe button while you're there. So Ronald, give us some background information on the movie, director, cast, and also anything that you know about these actors. I know that myself, having no affiliation with the movie industry, whenever I do read about things with actors, it could be the smallest thing, but it's always fun to hear. So go ahead, take it away.
All right. So Cassandro was directed by Roger Ross Williams. Firsthand, I can tell you he is nicer than you'd expect a normal person to be, let alone an Academy Award winner. He won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Short Film in 2009 for his film Music by Prudence. And he actually co-wrote and co-produced this film, if I'm not mistaken. And he was just a phenomenal person to work with. He was so kind and so generous. And we got to catch up. We obviously spoke on set when we were working, and we got to catch up at Sundance. And he was, for everybody bombarding him when I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. He's like, oh my God, Ronald, gave me a hug. He said hi to my wife, said hi to waved hi to my parents. It was just went above and beyond for being friendly in a way that, normal people aren't, let alone the person who's the star of the show for the moment. Yeah. So he was our director. We were led by Gael Garcia Bernal, who plays Saul or Cassandro. He is I have it up right here to make sure. He is a Golden Globe award-winning actor for Mozart in the Jungle. You might know him from Werewolf by Night. He was in the movie Old. He's in The Motorcycle Diaries. He's in Science of Sleep. phenomenal actor. He also co-produced this movie with his producing partner. They own La Corriento de Golfo production company. So it's him and Diego Luna produced this film together. But I never got to meet Diego, but I met Gael a few times on set. Again, very kind. He actually came up to me and said, "Hey, Ronald, I want to thank you for being a part of the film." And that was like blew my mind. A little side story. I was filming a scene. It was supposed to be like a Saturday morning with my son. So I'm in tidy whities and a white tank top and my era appropriate mullet wig. And I'm standing there like nervous because on the other side of any camera in a movie, if it's a big budget feature, there's 40 to 50 people doing stuff. And I'm there in my underwear, getting ready to do the scene in my first ever big movie. And, in between takes, he comes up and he had the mullet with like the low disconnected fade and it's bleached blonde. And he's wearing like the Cassandro, like leopard print tank top. And he's just there just to say hello. And wonderful guy. Can't say enough nice things about him. One of our other leads is Roberta Colindres, played Sabrina. She's been in a few different things. She was in the show Vida, which funnily enough, I was on. I was a bar patron in the background of the season 2 finale, but I was on that show. Anyway, she is phenomenal in the movie. We never worked together, didn't cross paths because Ronald Gonzales-Trujillo, I play young Eduardo. I play Saul's father in the flashbacks with his young self. So I never interact with Roberta because she plays Saul's wrestling trainer. Perla de la Rosa plays Yocasta, which is Saul's mother. She plays the adult version. If you've seen the film, this woman, wonderful performance from to start to finish. Every scene she's in, phenomenal. Yeah, she's definitely underrated. I think Roberta did a wonderful job as well. Rounding out the leads is Raul Castillo. He plays Gerardo. Don't want to spoil anything, but he's another wrestler who is friends with Saul. Thought he did a wonderful job. And then another, probably the biggest side note is Benito. Bad Bunny plays Felipe, a low-level gangster who kind of is a facilitator Saul in his career and his party life and making sure that the promoters are keeping Saul happy on his rise to fame. I didn't have any scenes with Bad Bunny, but we had alternating days on the same sets. And funnily enough, again, I'm jumping ahead with my side stories, but one night I was out to dinner and my brother-in-law's friend owns a restaurant in Mexico City. So it's in a nice area. I'm like, I'm going to walk around, explore the city. I get lost for about 10 minutes and I'm walking. I'm like, you know what? I don't speak enough Spanish for this shit. I've been drinking. I need to go home. It's getting late. I got to work tomorrow. So I'm like ordering my Uber and I look up and I see the Four Seasons. And I remember Roger, we were talking in between takes. And he's like, yeah, Benito, like he's staying and blah, blah, blah. And, they had the whole Four Seasons. I heard he was partying. It's just kind of anecdote about how, music superstars kind of bring a posse with them. And I look up and I'm like, oh, this is the Four Seasons. And I'm like, whoa. And then I see like 5 production vans pull in and giant guys get out. And I'm like, bet you that's Bad Bunny. And then I see him and I was like, wow, I should go and be like, hey, we're in a movie together. Hey. But then I played it through in my head. Best case scenario, they go, okay, and leave. Worst case scenario, I get beat up by 19 security guards. So anyway, I waved to nobody and got in my Uber and went back to the hotel.
Nice.
The storyline is, like we said, it's following Saul and Saul as he finds his alter ego, Cassandro. He's an exotico character and he's a gay amateur wrestler, follows through to his rise to stardom and, just his life as it goes along. One thing I really appreciate about this movie, my wife and I spoke about this, is a lot of times, especially with people from underrepresented communities, when you see their biopic, it's all about their suffering, right? And it kind of like, it almost like fetishizes like, oh, their life is so hard, right? Like, the Freddie Mercury movie that he's in, it's like either partying or he's miserable and all drug addled. And this movie, it shows Saul as like a figure of hope, even though the life that you see is not easy. He has like problems just like any other person, but like the message is like to accept yourself. And I really love that, again, biased because I'm in it, but I love the level that it viewed him as a person and not as like this figure to be, I don't know, canonized or to fetishize his suffering or, especially being in Mexico in the 80s and 90s, like being an openly gay man is not the easiest. As a Mexican man, I know that our culture is a little bit errs on the machismo side and maybe a little behind as far as like, LGBTQIA plus politics. So especially back then, it's not an easy thing. So I feel like a very simple route for the film to take would be to like just show, oh, it's so hard. People are mean to him. It's cruel. And yeah, we see that, but it focuses more on his ability to triumph in the face of that adversity and not to show the amount of suffering that it took to get there. And that's one thing that I would like to say up front that I appreciated about the film.
A quick little promo break here in this episode. If you're a fan of the podcast, you know that at some point there's a promotion for the Naboso Duo insoles. I just pulled these out of my shoes, gave them a quick rinse to get the sock dust off of them, and I wanted to talk about them because they're great. They're fantastic. They make an impact on your daily life. If you sit at a desk or if you're on your feet, sometimes your feet just feel achy, or maybe they feel like they went to sleep. That's for myself. I felt like after working a full day that my feet did not want to go to the gym, work out, do something active, and it led to some bad habits. But with these, I feel more active. I feel I can do more things, and I've been using them for over a year now. If your feet feel more active, you're going to be more active, and that equates to being more healthy. Check them out. There's a link in the description. See all the products they have, and let's get back to this episode. Yeah, and we're going to talk about the themes within the movie a little bit later on too. And I'm sure that, there are many themes displayed throughout this movie. And I know that for myself, walking out of the movie, my first thought, and I mean, I'm going to make a little lighthearted joke right now because there are some very serious tones to it. And I did say to my wife that I felt like this was a movie that kids should see because they see what it's like for somebody else, somebody that they would most likely never come in contact with. What did they go through? What did they face? How did they overcome it? And to be able to see different perspectives on different situations, I think that that's very important. And I mean, I'm in no way am I saying that this movie, Cassandro, is on the same level as, say, Remember the Titans. But I remember when I was young, that was one of the movies that we were shown to show that how people acted and what people faced. And it opens kids' eyes so that they understand that you are not in a bubble. There are things that happen outside. And I mean, there are scenes within this movie that probably would not be appropriate for kids. And I don't want to say what that is because it might get flagged on certain sites for saying what scene I'm talking about here. But it's a movie that you get to see somebody like go through adversity, deal with so many different issues, but keep that level of positivity and that level of also giving back. And I feel like that also plays into how he was raised. And I mean, I give myself a little refresher prior to this episode. I threw the movie on because I saw it when it came out in theaters, and I'm drawing a blank on when that was. Was that in September?
September 22nd.
Yeah. So I saw it when it came out. And so it's been a minute since then. So I threw it on. And one of the pieces that I just picked up a few hours ago was about how the mother and the role she played in it, despite the struggles they're going through, she still wanted to give back. She still wanted to help others. And I think that displays in Cassandro and his outlook on life. And so I know that we're jumping ahead here and sharing a lot. So let me get to some more background here with Ronald. With this, I wanted to get Ronald's perspective more. I think that that's a pretty exciting part of this episode in the MovieBuffs podcast. Technically, Ronald is our first movie star on our podcast. So, I mean, all the things that Ronald already shared, that's very fascinating. Like I said, for listeners, for myself to hear, I was talking with Ron at that time in terms of, he was in Mexico City. So to hear things that he was doing, but for our listeners and to share even more, Ronald, what was it like? What was your experiences like working on this film and being in a big city like Mexico City?
Well, it was super exciting. I got the audition and then heard back from him, did a callback. And then I was literally in between clients at work, packing my bag. I had gone home to have lunch, going back to work, and I see a number from Mexico City. I decline it. And they call right back. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. It's got to be a scam. Decline it. And so the third time I'm like, hello. And they're like, hi, is this Ronald? I'm like, who is calling? You know, because you always assume it's scam likely. Who may I ask is calling? And they go, this is blah, blah, blah from the production offices at blah, blah. And I was like, oh, yeah. Hi. And it's probably a scam, right? And they go, you know, we loved you for this. We want to offer you the role of young Eduardo. We filmed these days of these days. And this is like Friday. Let's just say it's Friday the 18th. They're like, okay, we need you in Mexico City by Wednesday the 22nd. I was like, oh, they're like, okay, can you do that? I'm like, yeah, sure. They're like, okay, this is the rate. Is this okay with you? This is the director. You want to do anything else? And I was just so like excited and stupid. I was like, no, that's good. And we hung up the phone. I was like, wait, what? I didn't ask any questions. So then I get an email immediately with the info and I'm like, holy crap. Cause I'm like Googling everybody involved. I'm like, what the heck? So it was like mind blowing. And then I had 4.5 days to like basically take 2 weeks off work to go to Mexico City, and we filmed for a few days. I went back home, and then I went back to Mexico City a second time for another 2 weeks. And then finally at the tail end of production, I went to El Paso for 2 weeks. And it was exciting. It was a whirlwind. It was, that's all I can say. It was just like, it felt surreal the whole time. Like I got there and I'm like, is this really happening? What is going on? You know, you get to the airport, there's a guy, your driver. I was like, what? I get a fucking driver? This is crazy. A little sign with my name on it. I felt guilty because I'm like walking up to him like, hey, could you hold that up? Because it's like, you know.
Yeah.
So I have my videos. Maybe I'll send one. We could post it on the MovieBuffs Instagram. But I have videos of me in my trailer, just like, look, there's my fridge. And now it was super surreal. And, you know, it's the biggest thing I've worked on. It's something I'm super proud of. And it's like, it's just weird to think like you said, to follow your dream and try something that sounds outlandish. You know, you're like, oh, I want to be in a major motion picture. And just like, at least once in my life, I'll be able to say that I did it. So like, it's something that I'll forever be grateful for and be proud of.
Yeah, definitely. We're all proud of you. And what was it like can you explain for listeners, like what is that like with going on a movie set? What does that look like? Like, what are you doing most of the time? I know that when you actually shared with me when you were there, what it typically is like, because I'm guessing the majority of our listeners have no idea what it's like being on the set of a movie, how a movie's filmed. And I mean, they just literally go to the movie theater, sit down, and they just take it all in, but it's not filmed. Most movies are not filmed sequentially. So yeah. I remember when you shared with me what your experiences were like when you were there, I found it fascinating, but can you break that down a little bit?
All right. So, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's like I said before, it's one of those weird things. You don't realize that if there's a camera running, there's at least one person behind it, and at least one person holding a boom mic, and at least one person holding the lights, and at least one person who set up those lights, and at least one person directing it, and at least two people holding up the video village. So it's dozens and dozens of people just beyond that fourth wall. Every movie you're watching. That's why I try to make a point whenever we review something like, yeah, I didn't like it, or I thought maybe it was a money grab, but the people working on it, there is no replacing their hard work and their artistry. It's one of those weird things where like, you know, even movies we crap on, you're like, but yeah, hundreds of people worked really hard on that. Even if they were like, this movie's going to suck, they still worked hard on it. So that's something that I want to impress upon people to always appreciate. Win, lose, or draw, this movie did, you know, again, a movie, even if just say something you hated, at least it employed a few dozen, if not 100 people for months on end, and then bled and feed their family. So that's one of the amazing things. You got to create some art and have fun with it. But the way it's filmed is actually really funny because I got my first full read through of the script on the plane. So I was like, I don't even know exactly what I'm going to be doing. And I was joking with my wife, like, oh, what if there's this? What if there's that in it? But the version of the script I got was, let's say, Pink Draft V1. And that was on Monday. When I filmed on Thursday after COVID testing and wardrobe fitting, we were on Pink Draft V5. And then, you know, by the time I came back 6 weeks later for the last bit of shooting where we finished up in El Paso, we were on Blue Draft V11. Then when we go to see the film at Sundance, it's an entirely different movie than any of those scripts. So I have the scripts all on my desktop and they're not what we saw in theaters. So not only are they filmed out of order, but people notice they're constantly rewriting it, because something that can happen is, say, for instance, we got this office to film in, right? And you had this shot in mind that needed to go up and around, and the whole scene has to take place while you're going up and around, me lying in bed, freaking out. You get in my office, you're like, oh, it's an 8-foot ceiling. We needed 11. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to cut the roof off of this building, or am I going to rewrite the scene so that the camera doesn't go up and around? Okay, I'll rewrite the scene so it doesn't go up and around. Now that I've done that, okay, well, what he's talking about is a metaphor that's being played out with the movement of the camera. So that doesn't make sense. Let's cut that and rewrite it. So now you got a whole new version of the script because everything after that moment has to change. Touching back to the strike, that's part of the reason why there's a lot of problems when they go on to keep making movies, even when just the writers were on strike. Because when that stuff happens, no one's like, if you're not allowed a writer, you're not allowed to fix that. So what happens is guys who don't know what they're doing, even a director who might, if a director's writer, they can't redo it. Anyway, so you have producers and people that aren't necessarily the artist side having to make those decisions. And that's where you get some movies like notoriously X-Men Origins Wolverine filmed during a writer's strike. And if you notice, the movie kind of has like 5 or 6 different things that could have been a whole movie. And it's because they weren't allowed to do any rewrites on set. Once they locked in the draft and the strike started, they couldn't fix it. So whenever the studio was like, we need a guy that looks like Baraka. Right? And there's nobody there to like, okay, well, that shouldn't work. So they just have to do it. So that's one of the ways that the filming process really does. It's making a movie is kind of like sculpting something, because the sculpture is not done until it's finished. Like you sketch it out first, right? You get the clay. It's not done. You can do the whole head on the sculpture. Doesn't mean it's done. You have to get head to toe, polish it up, then it's done. So people think that a film is written and it's set, then it's filmed and it's set. But even after it's filmed, you get in the editing bay. And this is one of the things that Roger touched on during his Q&A at Sundance. They got into the editing bay, and his vision for the film that was closer to the scripted versions that I had seen, he was like, it didn't give you the feeling they were looking for. So in the edit, again, now it's a third movie. So they say you make a movie 3 times: when you write it, when you shoot it, when you edit it.
I think that's such a fascinating breakdown for anybody listening, because I feel like we only hear that because they get a lot of publicity, like Marvel movies, about they're constantly rewriting and how directors don't know what the final movie's going to look like and things along that nature. And I know I'm giving one extreme example here, but we're talking about a movie that, it's not a Marvel movie, but it's still going through that same process, and the importance of the writer strike and why having writers on set and all these things that the average viewer would have never really understood, because they don't see those parts. And so I think that breakdown right there for a movie that is, I'll say, smaller in comparison to like a superhero movie where we mostly hear those types of things. It showcases the importance of what all the actors, writers, what the strikes, what they went through. Because I will say that knowing you and knowing just a very small piece about how movies are made, I call that maybe like a percentage of a percentage. I don't know anything. And when I typically get mad about a movie, I think of more, this is probably because I'm a business owner. I think about executives and why are they making these decisions? There's a lot of good that comes out of movies being made. Like you mentioned, all the people that get jobs, getting to provide for their families. But there's the other side. There's people in an office making decisions that maybe are not qualified, or maybe therefore because their dad knows somebody. And and to me, that's always who I typically blame. But very fascinating breakdown right there. I think that it's just a piece of what people listening and people that enjoy movies, what goes into all of it. And there's so much, like what you mentioned with the script breakdowns and how much it evolves and changes over time. I think that was one of the questions that I asked you after I saw the movie, because I remember when I first saw the first trailer, I believe it made it appear that Bad Bunny was in more of a relationship with Cassandro. And so I walked away thinking, like there's going to be more of Bad Bunny. And I think we're going to be talking about spoilers in this movie. So spoiler alert.
That's funny. One of the things about the script drafts is in the first draft that I saw. So I flew into Mexico City with 3 days left of pre-pro. So it's pre-production. So I had to go in, COVID tested negative, and then isolated for like a day or two, tested again. So on the second or third day, I went into the wardrobe wardrobe office. They fitted me for everything, tailored up my clothes, whatever. And then they gave me another script. And at that point, so shooting hadn't started yet. And Bad Bunny's character was a different person. Like it wasn't the drug dealer guy. In the initial script, it was a different role he was playing.
Oh, wow.
So that's how far it changed. So by the time a week later, when they started filming, his role was a different person.
Huh.
And I think what happened along the way there is, he's not a seasoned of an actor. So maybe they modified the character to make it something more within his range. Because, even if you have a huge name, it's not helpful if the huge name is there. Not that I think he did do a great job in his part, but if you brought him in and gave him this really heavy role, like maybe the initial intention or maybe like what it looked like to begin with, but you cut it together, you see his heavy role, and like there's something about it that's not lining up. Like it can distract from everything else,
Yeah.
Like what's the film? It's got Christian Bale and Margot Robbie, Amsterdam. How I've never seen the film, but the only thing I've seen out of it is Taylor Swift has a weird role where she gets run over by a taxi. And that's the only thing that I've ever heard about the film. And it's like, you don't want that to be the legacy of your film. It's like, there's somebody super famous who does something weird and that's all you remember it for. So I think that's one of those things where those permutations have to take place in order to serve the main story. Another fun anecdote is we met someone at Sundance. And this poor woman, she was like, I had this big scene. I played Raul's wife and we had this falling out. And then we see the film and I'm not in it. She's in the background, a couple of scenes in the picture. But another thing that changed is there were scenes that Saul wasn't privy to, right? So there's things like Geraldo having like a argument with his wife that Saul wouldn't know about and isn't in. And what I think happened in the edit is like, what? I think this movie's stronger if Saul is our point of view. So if you notice, there's not any moment or any scene that he is not in because you're seeing this world from his eyes, basically, which is why I thought it kind of had that, even in the darkest spots, it had this like uplifting kind of feel to it because you see the spirit of this man. Like his thing is always, he's smiling and, big and boisterous. So they focused in the whole point of view of the film from his eyes. So to have like a side character have an argument with his wife doesn't serve that. And I think that kind of it added to the emotional resonance of it. And one of the things that I've heard from everybody is that, Gael gave it an amazing performance and he's a wonderful actor. I really do. I think he gave a captivating performance. I think that helped because there's no point where you disconnect from him. Even when we see the younger version of him, that little boy was adorable, by the way, and looks exactly like him. But it feels so connected. Like you feel like you've never left this guy's side. So throughout the movie, you really care.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, tangent.
No, but I think one piece that I want to go back to with, and it was a small piece that you said with your testing. And I think this goes back to, and it's a small little lighthearted joke again about everyone's probably heard or seen the clip of Tom Cruise freaking out on the set of Mission Impossible. And he was talking about the testing and the importance of it because all the things that we've already talked about, the jobs at hand, the task at hand, and all the things that they have to go to, you just broke down basically 3 days that you would have to go through testing and then you quarantine in order to film your scenes. And let's say that you did something happened and you or another actor tested positive, how that would affect so many pieces down the line. And while we joke about, okay, Tom Cruise is crazy. I mean, side note, Ron and I both love Tom Cruise and, we love Tom Cruise movies, but I mean, we're joking about this explosive clip that got out, but he's 100% correct. There's so many things at risk.
And another thing that is to consider too is he's producing that movie. So some of this is actually his money. But what happens is when they're filming a movie like that or any movie that's on location, every single person that is working on the movie not only has been paid to fly there, they bought their plane tickets, they're paying for your room, they're paying you a per diem for food. So if you have to sit there for 3 weeks and everything shuts down because you got sick, now there's 3 weeks of per diem and hotel and expenses, and you have to push back the flights or people leaving now because they're not leaving for 3 more weeks. Yeah. So those times at, say, even at the lowest case, it's like $400, but there's 150 people. It's like $400 a day times 150 people for days and days and days on end. You end up, on a movie that size, that could be tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So much money over
the course of 2 or 3 days that you're just burning because, like he said, you don't want to be a team player. So again, it seems like a lot, but if you like really try to empathize with where he's coming from, like, yeah, and also he's known to be intense, but you're like, yeah, no, there's a lot at stake to people's jobs.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things about the actor strike. Like, you know, people are like, oh, actors need to shut up, but no, it affects more people. Like the studios are usually big businesses are usually the ones that are wrong, like in the world, you know, no one's like Exxon Valdez. I think those guys are right. Those ducks fucking asked for it. But, you know, it's like being stingy, the billionaires being stingy or forgetting about the grip guy who can't go to work because there's nobody filming. Yeah. Or my wife in her line of work had people coming and looking for employment because like, hey, I'm a PA, but there's nothing filming. Like my husband's an editor. I'm a PA. We're both basically unemployed. So there's like, there's this, it's called above the line and below the line people. Below the line is all the technical people, all of, you know, your craft services. That's dozens of people making food, serving food, cleaning up. There's your drivers. Like I said, there's the light guys, there's the sound guys, there's the people that move the cables. Yeah. Like all those people matter. And that's why it's important to like, yes, the art is great and everything, but we need to take care of everybody because there's a whole ecosystem. Yeah. Yeah. Transition here. Did you personally have any nerves going into any scenes or even being on set? I mean, I think we've painted the picture of what it was like being on set for you. What were your nerves like? Did you have any? And did you have to tell yourself anything prior to action being called? Yeah, definitely. So one of the things was we filmed in Mexico City. I am of Mexican descent, but I don't speak fluent Spanish. So there was this whole language barrier where, you know, while I'm quarantining, I speak enough Spanish to say hello, ask where I'm going, but I'm not going to go out and make friends. I'm not going to go out and try to party. One, because I'm there for work, but two, say I get lost. I'm not conversational enough to like safely keep myself where I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So I'm basically holed up in my hotel room. Like, all right, can't go get sick. I cannot get lost. You know, I don't want to go and be that guy who blows his opportunity because you got drunk and hungover and didn't pick up your phone when your driver came. So it's just like isolating experience where I'm in another country for the first time by myself. Never been in another country by myself. Always traveled with my wife, my family. So I'm there. I'm like, wow, I'm really just alone here. You and I talked a lot, which was nice. Mm-hmm. We did some, I was doing some work for Kips and I had time to train at the time. So that was nice to give me something to do. But yeah, just going to the gym and not communicating. But one of the things that helped like built up the nerves too was there's one scene. It was a two-pronged thing. There's one scene where it's young Saul thinking back to how he saw his father as a child. And now it's a major plot point that I'm his father. And as a kid, I have a family. I have a wife from El Paso and I have two daughters. And him and his mother live on the border of El Paso and Mexico. And they're my family that I show up on the weekends. My wife knows about it, but she doesn't like it. But I basically keep them at arm's length. Yes. So there's a scene and in the script, it says my wife, Sarah, comes and sits on my lap and gives me a kiss. And then we kind of shoot the sun off. So I'm like, I've been married 2-3 years at this point. My wife and I have been together for 15 years. What? I got to kiss somebody else? So, that's nerve wracking. So not only is it my first film in a foreign country, now I got to do this. I'm like, hey, sweetie, like, and she's like, no, I understand. I'm like, but in your head, you're like, yeah, but this is so crazy. It's like so crazy. Like imagine if you had to tell your wife like, hey, it's work. Like, even if you say it's cool, you're like, I don't know though. Like, cause if it were me, I know I could say it's cool all day, but I'm going to feel, I don't know, it's going to feel weird. So there was that nerves. And then to compound that, the location we were shooting was actually up in the mountains outside of Mexico City, about 2.5 hours away. The woman who plays young Yocasta, wonderful, wonderful woman, is also her first acting job, or first major acting job. She didn't speak any English whatsoever. I speak barely any Spanish. We're going through the mountains. No service. Can't play on our phones. So we're in a travel van together from the hotel to set for 3 hours going up in the mountains. And thank God for the Apple Translate app not needing Wi-Fi. So we were just literally putting it in there and clicking, hi, what do you do? So, she was a school teacher, very nice. So this whole time I'm like, oh my God. So we finally get up there and the driver drops me off and leaves. And I'm like, the person who's supposed to meet me, I text her. She's like, hey, I'm stuck on the physical set. I can't come get you from Transpo right now. So I'm like asking people and I'm like, ¿a dónde va? Soy Eduardo, ¿dónde va a mi, and I'm trying to like think of how to say dressing room. I don't know shit. So someone finally grabs me. Oh, hey, go. And then you go to hair and makeup for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then you get your wardrobe on. Then you get in another like cart that takes you down into set. And I'm like, just absolutely like, if anybody's ever played sports, you know, before a big game where you get that pit in your stomach, you're like, oh, okay, just got to get the game started. So at this point, it's been 6 hours of just got to get this game started. And then we finally sit down and, you know, the scene goes well. We do a few takes, but that's another thing that people don't realize is that short scene, you know, we filmed a little bit longer, usually film longer and cut down. But for every scene you film, do it 10, 12 times and you move the lights. So that was like a 6 or 7 hour on set day. And then you pack it up and do it all in reverse. So it was definitely like a Alice in Wonderland type experience. One of the things I am grateful for the language barrier is that Roger doesn't speak much Spanish. Roger Ross Williams, our director, he doesn't speak much Spanish either. Spanish either. Jeez Louise. And so, you know, we're sitting there in between takes and I'm like, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity. And he's like, oh, no, you too. And so we got to talking and there was no, like a lot of the PAs are bilingual, but he and I were, you know, one of like 12 native English speakers that were from the United States. So we were just conversing very easily. And it was like, oh, that's somebody easy physically to talk to. And then who's very friendly. So we got a chance to actually kind of communicate in a way you wouldn't on a different film set. Because, you know, my character is very pivotal, I would say, to the story. But my actual screen time isn't huge. I don't have a bunch of lines. I'm not like a star. But so I got this one-on-one interaction that you wouldn't get otherwise. So that's something I was grateful for, that the nerves paid off because it, you know, got me there.
Yeah. So you said that scene was a 6-7 day set, or that it took 6-7 days to film?
No, it took like 7 hours.
Okay, 7 hours. Well, yeah. Again, I mean, just to place the emphasis on it, that I mean, the scene he's talking about in the movie, I mean, it's a relatively quick scene, but the production that goes into that, the setup, everything. I mean, there's so many things that I don't even know what went into it, but I'm sure that it's a lot of people working a lot. I know we keep placing a lot of emphasis on that, but that's the behind the scenes that you don't really get to know about, but it's a lot of people working. So very fascinating stuff there. And I'm sure I didn't think about the part about a woman sitting on your lap. And it's funny because
yeah, he tries to give me because in the script it says like she gives him a kiss like to mark her territory. And I'm like, oh man, this is so nerve-wracking. You know, it's part of the job, but it's still like, especially the first time, I'm like, I don't know how to. So
now I got to go back and watch the scene because that didn't even cross my mind.
And you don't even, and we filmed it and you don't even see it. You just hear it.
Nice. Well, let's transition to a little bit about the movie stuff, and we're talking about the movie, but talk about things that we like, and then transition to more. And I'm sure that you could provide more insight to a lot of these things. So, Ron, what was your favorite scene from the movie?
There's one is my favorite, not because of the movie itself, but because of kind of what went into it. Mm-hmm. There's a scene that we flash back to a few times, and it's actually the one I told you where I was stuck in my underwear for a long day, but it's where Eduardo introduces a young Saul to wrestling. Mm-hmm. So I give him this little Santo wrestling action figure. We sit there and we watch the wrestling match. So obviously it was a whole day of filming it, and it reoccurs a few times because it's very important to him. It's kind of what split him into this life. Like subtextually, we're meant to understand that he became a wrestler to try to seek his father's love. Right, because that's what they bonded over. That's the only thing they were the same on. So he's always been a wrestler to seek his father's approval and his love. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was like a really, meaningful scene, because without saying it, it shows like his whole life is looking for this father that, he may or may not ever get by the end. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that really I love the scene itself is because so there's a technique in acting called like personalization and replacement. So, if you're acting with somebody, say you needed to tell somebody you love them and make it convincing, you wouldn't look at whoever you're talking to. In your head, you're talking to your wife. If you really need to be there and really feel it, you in your mind, you're at the altar again and you see her and, you feel the breeze and all this stuff. And then when you say it, if that's what's in your brain, when you say it, it has a whole different weight to it than when you're just like, oh, hey, I love you. Even if it's some star you've always had a crush on when it's different. So for me, it was important. Like it was special because the personalization for me was like I have nephews I'm really close to, and it was really fun to like. So I was joking like they were in the movie with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife's oldest brother, her son, like real close. So that was like one of the keys in for me. So that was really cool.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. I know what scene you're talking about. So, and now I know some background to it, and I'm sure listeners watching will now understand that those pieces. I would say that my favorite scene, and there's some build up to this in the movie. The main actor goes through a little bit of, I'll say, training, because when we first meet Saul and what he's going through, he's kind of he's one of the wrestlers that the main star gets to beat up on, in a featured match. He's one of those ones that gets beat up and never wins. And he wants to get better. He wants to be a star. He wants to provide for his mom. And so he goes and finds a trainer, and he goes through this whole, training sequence, and then goes to this match where he feels more accomplished. And this leads to another match where he ultimately wins that match, which is going against tradition, going against what typically happens at these matches. And along that time, he also becomes an exotico. And I think that that whole sequence there is enjoyable for the audience. It's something that you see somebody working hard. You see so many different themes that are played throughout the movie, talking about breaking tradition, talking about overcoming adversity. You see so many different pieces of that. And this is pretty early on in the movie. And I think that I'm talking about multiple scenes here, but that whole sequence is probably my favorite because of you feel for the character immediately. You've already bought into everything that he's going through. And I mean, that goes to how it's edited. It goes how it's written, how it's acted, all those pieces. And I just thought it was a great sequence. And I mean, you just feel happy. You honestly just feel happy watching it. And you're just like, yes, like he wins. And so, I mean, the scene is, I think it's a part of the trailers. And literally, Gael, he gets down on his knees and he's so happy. And you honestly feel so happy for him. You feel that through the screen. And I think it takes a lot of pieces. And, Ronald and I in this podcast, MovieBuffs podcast, in different movies, we talk about that all the time. How invested are we as an audience? How invested are we in a relationship and what they're trying to convey through the screen? And so I'm sure anybody listening to this can picture in their head a movie or a sequence or a scene where there's no emotional buildup, there's no investment from the audience. So it literally just falls flat on its face. And so
it just comes and goes.
Exactly.
That's one of those things I said about, I think that was a really smart decision to focus in on him so hard. Is like, you really feel his triumphs. Yeah. Which was a beautiful thing about, not, you see all of the hard parts. So that way the triumphs hit harder, but it's not one of those films where you're like, life is just hard and like whips him down. Yeah. Agree. Favorite character? Ooh, honestly, besides Cassandro, I really liked Yocasta. I thought Perla, who played his mom, did a great job. And she just had this like to the end of her time in the film, she had this like you said, that spirit of like wanting to give back and wanting to still be like, she puts on her outfits and she still goes out and like, she's still herself and still kind of shines even when life is hard and when she's sick. And that was a beautiful performance. And probably my favorite character. And then Saul. Yeah, agree. Great performance by her. Like I said, the second time watching it or trying to watch it, I can say that I don't speak Spanish. So it is a movie where I do have to fully watch it. So when I was fully watching, I was invested, but when I wasn't watching it, there's no way that I'm processing any of it. My favorite character was Sabrina, the trainer. I think relating into a little bit of the work that we do as fitness instructors, or even as a manager, seeing individuals that you could see the potential, you can see what they can do. I think that really came home in her character.
And also when she first meets Saul, she says, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll figure out the payment later," because she sees something. She sees somebody that's hungry, that wants to to grow, that wants to become better. And I think that those themes are very prevalent in our industry. So that was one of my favorite roles, other than you, of course, Ronald.
Oh, of course. I thought it was really nice too to not have that kind of formulaic sports or biography movie where the manager and the star break up and have a big falling out. Mm-hmm. There's a moment where you think it might happen, and she's like, "Nope, I'm your friend. I have your back, and I know that you're acting out because you're not like you're hurting." Yeah. And instead of it being that like standing in the rain screaming at each other, it's just they hug quietly, and she continues to have his back. And it's like, I don't know, it's just like nice to see them break the formula a little bit. And then you show like, sometimes friendships, like in real life, if like one of us were doing the same thing, like, "Hey, Tyler, you're acting like an asshole, but I get it, and I have your back." Like it's not going to be scream at each other and don't talk for a month and then meet at the airport. It's like, no, I got you. Kind of thing. So,
agree.
I like that.
A lot of themes in this movie. I know that we've talked about a lot of them already, and there's breaking tradition, as we talked about, with the main character and the roles that he's going into. There's overcoming adversity and so many different pieces in this movie. And then also family dysfunction is another one. Did you have any favorite underlying theme of the movie?
Yeah, I thought my favorite theme in it is like, whether or not you're trying to come out, or, like he's putting on the Exotico character, he's a openly gay man, but it's not easy. And there's relationship stuff that comes with that. But no matter who you are, there's always, at some point in your life, it's going to be tempting to try to be the person you think other people want you to be, or to be a version of yourself that might necessarily be true to yourself, might be easier.
Yeah.
And it's like that. It shows that like, not only did Saul, he didn't create Cassandro to escape. He created to show like, that's his real self. He even says, he's like, you should have seen him. Cassandro is so sexy and he's so in charge and he can do this and he can do that. And the longer he is this character, it's the part of himself he always wanted to be, but was scared to show. And then by the end, he combines it into his real life. And just that feeling of like, we build ourselves and you're allowed to be whichever version of yourself you want to be, especially as long as you're not hurting anybody. There's a caveat there. But it's that theme of like, accept yourself and decide who you want to be and make your world and do your work so that you can be that person. Because if not, then what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And it's a little bit of combination of two of them, with the overcoming adversity and the breaking tradition. Early in the movie, you see another wrestler come over to Saul and basically say, you never win, and you're going to make the big guy unhappy, because there's a tradition set in terms of how these wrestling matches play out, and certain characters within a role or with wrestling. I'm sorry to break it to some people if they don't know that it's fake.
No, Tyler, don't talk.
But there's a certain role that characters play, and within Mexican culture and how it plays out, that the Exoticos they don't win. And, that was very important, I think, early on to see, because that's one of the things that he has to overcome. He has to break tradition. He has to, and ultimately this leads to the end when he's going against one of his idols that he idolized growing up, and why he followed and why he did all this stuff, and, why it was such an honor to go to this match at the end. And yet he's breaking tradition and in that role. And it's such a powerful movie in that way that hopefully people see that when they are at their lowest lows, they can still try their best. They can still give it their best efforts. And I think that especially at a time right now when I know that there's many people that are struggling or they're going through stuff, and it's one of those things where you don't know the outcome or where it's going to lead to. But you just got to keep on that wave.
Agreed, man. Totally.
Yeah. Well, who would you I think that, of course, we would say we recommend this movie for multiple reasons. But I would say that there might be an ideal individual that would enjoy it more than others. Like I said, that early on in this episode, I would recommend it for a lot of people, and that for maybe with some some type of recommendation for some scenes, maybe fast forwarding for some audiences.
Yeah.
But who would you recommend? Who do you think is that ideal viewer?
If I had to build a viewer in a lab, no, I definitely Bad Bunny fans. So all the Bad Bunny fans, go watch it. Watch it for 5 or 6 times. It's on Amazon Prime right now.
Exactly.
No, but I think, like you said, especially, an adolescent person who might be dealing with, coming to terms with their sexuality and their identity. I think it is a powerful thing for that. And specifically, we don't get a lot of, I can't think of another Latino led major motion picture about a gay man that's triumphant and is all these things. And he's an athlete and he's a star. And again, spoiler alert, like he wins, even in the matches he loses, he wins because he's gotten in the arena and gotten these chances. So I think especially for Latino kids dealing with their gender identity or dealing with their sexuality, like it's a really good message again about you build yourself. There is no rule to who you can be or how big you can be or, what it means to be yourself. So
I like that. I think you outlined an individual that I would 100% agree that, and you said it earlier too, with becoming comfortable with your own skin, and you get that sense throughout the movie, what the main character is going through. And I can say that anybody that is going from being a teen to young adult to being an adult, that you often, of course, you want to be liked and you want to, be happy, but sometimes you're not happy with yourself and going through those struggles. So somebody in that boat, I think from the, the story of it, I think is great. Yes, there are subtitles in the movie. I don't think it takes away from any part of it at all. When I walked out, I think that was one of the questions that my wife asked me was, what do you think about the subtitles? And it didn't even process in my mind that I was like, oh yeah, there were subtitles in the movie. But I mean, you're enjoying it. It doesn't take away. You're not missing anything. I think that's what sometimes people think is, I'm not to be able to watch what's going on the screen. At no point that I thinking, I missed something. It's still a very well-made movie. So I think that if you are a moviegoer, you're going to enjoy it regardless.
Yeah, for sure. And then the only thing I felt was lost in the subtitles is that some of like the idioms and sayings that they'd say in Spanish were more clever than their translation.
Good point.
But you only pick that up if you know a little bit. I know enough Spanish to pick it up. I was like, the funnier version of him saying that is in Spanish.
Interesting. Well, let's wrap this
up. Like some of the ways they greet each other is just curse words. But in English, they're like, what's up, buddy? And in Spanish, it's like, hola, cabrón. It's like, what's up, fucker?
That's a good point.
So other than that, I don't think you missed anything.
A little bit of trivia to throw in here, just about the movie, a little background information to wrap us up here. So, Ronald, why don't you read us the first one, and then I will follow it up.
Okay, and I know why Tyler wanted me to read this one, because he doesn't know how to say Saul's last name. Saul Armendariz Cassandro was born May 20th, 1970, and he's an American-born Mexican luchador. He works as an exotico for several independent promotions all over the world under the ring name Cassandro. He is a former NWA World Welterweight and UWA World Lightweight Champion. This guy wrestled Ice Cube? Becoming the first exotico in history to hold a championship in the UWA. At the age of 15, Armendariz quit school and began training lucha libre in Juarez. He eventually took the ring name of Cassandro from a Tijuana brothel keeper named Cassandra, whom he adored. His career was marred by gay discrimination, causing him to attempt suicide in 1991 and also abuse drugs and alcohol, but he achieved sobriety in 2003 and continued wrestling up until 2017.
Wow.
And yeah, like some of that hardships, like I said, it's touched on, but it's not the point of the film, which is awesome. And I was going to say, unfortunately, this is not in there, but Cassandro actually suffered a major stroke. I believe it was 2021, being James 1. So as the movie was ramping up. So he has been able to return to his ability to walk. He is still recovering from aphasia, which is a condition brought on by damage to parts of the brain that handle language. Mm-hmm. So you can understand what people are saying, but you're no longer able to form the words to coincide to your thoughts. So it was very sad. It's like when I met him on set, again, very kind, beautiful human being. Even coming off with a stroke, he was in a wheelchair. It didn't necessarily look like he was doing well, but he still had that smile. The smile that Gael does is like that's his like his baseline demeanor. The real Saul is just always smiling, and he still had that even not being able to walk or speak. And from the time we filmed to when I saw him at Sundance, he was able to walk around again. He's able to say a few words, and he had a friend with him to help him speak. So he is making a recovery. And anybody who's listening to this, go follow him at El Cassandro Exático on Instagram and then wish him well. But yeah, very kind man, and thankfully making a recovery.
Yeah. One more trivia piece here. Director Roger Ross Williams partnered with longtime collaborator.
How did you have trouble with that name?
Oh man, we'll joke about it after. Film editor David Teague to write the screenplay. They wrote the screenplay over the course of several years. He basically stalked the guy, Gael Garcia Bernal, for a year. He said that he'd go to the Academy Awards and tap him on the shoulder and say, "I'm doing this thing about Cassandro. I have this screenplay." I remember there was one moment when Gael was at the Governor's Awards and he was sitting with, oh man, these names are going to get
Alejandro G. Iñárritu. And Alfonso Cuarón.
And I, being very intimidated, he went up to him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hi, remember me?" Finally, his agents got them in touch when they got to the pitch, and he said that he was in. So I thought that was another interesting one to throw in there, just because it's one of those things where we don't know how movies work. We don't know how things come together, just being an audience member. But I think we're all very happy it did come together for many pieces. Not only was it an enjoyable movie, but our great Ron was a part of it, and he got to be able to share a lot of these pieces. Well, Ron, why don't you sign us off here?
Ooh, well, that was longer than most main sets, but we got some shit to say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank everybody once again for being here with us. I'm so happy to be back. Hopefully we can cover some films that we didn't get to cover if anybody's interested. And we'll definitely be doing more episodes moving forward. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the show, for being here with us. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate it. For Tyler, El Tigre Valencia, and the MovieBuffs podcast, we want to say follow us on all the socials, smash that like button, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks.